Well, good afternoon and welcome back to our fourth and final session of today, but certainly not of our content distribution forum. My name is Robert Bell. I'm the Executive Director, for those of you who were not here earlier, of the Society of Satellite Professionals International, as well as of the World Teleport Association. And I'd like to welcome you here to our content distribution forum. It's produced every year by the Society of Satellite Professionals and the World Teleport Association in cooperation with NAB. From Monday through Wednesday, we will present 12 panel sessions on the business and technology of content distribution, from traditional broadcasting to IPTV, from the triple play to mobile video. And then on Thursday, we'll provide playback of the most popular sessions of the past 3 days. This program is made possible by the sponsorship of leading companies in the business, including Intelsat, the operator of the world's largest satellite fleet, Inmarsat, the global leader in mobile satellite services, Umbrado Systems, which offers video processing solutions for HD broadcast cameras and tapeless studios, and by Cisco Systems, a provider of video, IPTV, cable, and content delivery solutions around the world. And I also want to thank PSSI Global, formerly PSSI Global Services, for providing live and recorded video coverage of our forum. That's available streamed live and will be also then on the sites of WTA and SSPI for the next 12 months. You can visit them down that way in the Central Hall at booth C6448. And finally, if you want to know any more about WTA or SSPI, you'll find some literature at the entrance to our forum. Our topic here is the battle for the next billion media consumers. Leading it is a gentleman, good friend of mine, Jimmy Schaeffler. He's the chairman of the Carmel Group. He'll be doing a super session, I believe, tomorrow on an interesting topic. He's also published a couple of books for NAB on digital signage and digital video recorders. I have to confess I have not yet worked my way through them, but I will. And without further ado, Jimmy Schaeffler.
Thank you very much. Today we're going to be talking about another one of those topics like the one that preceded this session, which was when will the IPTV of the world, the internet video, kill TV? And I think the answer was maybe never, but maybe soon. In other words, nobody really knows. This is called the battle for the next billion media consumers. And I'm going to just very briefly read the paragraph here, and then Randall's going to put up my slides, and we're going to go through some introductions. And I wanted to get Randall maybe to look at the slide real quick and realize that we're not quite current, but we're getting there. So I'm going to read this to you. It's the battle for the next billion media consumers. This session reviews the most important new companies, deals, and business changes in the American media scene and forecasts the patterns that will shape its future. As digital television, IPTV, and broadband have swept around the world, they have begun remaking the traditional business of media and entertainment. IPTV brings telcos into the television business with a mix of DSL and optical fiber. Cable and satellite TV companies market a triple play of video, voice, and internet. Established companies struggle to hold on to their franchises, while upstarts introduce new business models and dealmakers circle looking for opportunity. So that's what we're going to try and cover in the next 55 minutes. May I remind you to turn off your cell phone so as to not interrupt the panelists or to interrupt your people sitting next to you. And if you have questions, please raise your hand toward the end of the session. What we're going to do is we're going to go through a quick introduction, and I'm going to show my slides and raise some thoughts, some points. Then we're going to go to open Q&A, and then we're going to come back to you so that you can get a little value out of your attendance here. I think it's going to be very interesting and very topical. On my right should be Mr. Jeff Bixler. Jeff was invited at the last minute. We had another panelist withdraw at the 11th hour, and if Jeff comes in any minute now, we're going to sit him, but I'm going to introduce him in advance, so please treat him very nicely even if he arrives late. I understand he got in here very late last night and might have had a little bit of problems getting his speaker badge. Now, I'm going to try this once, and if I succeed, I'm not going to say it again. If I don't succeed, I'm not going to say it again. But the gentleman to my right is from Intelsat. He is a vice president of marketing. His name is Peter Ostapiuk. Close enough?
Close enough.
Ostapiuk. Ostapiuk. we're just going to call him Peter O. And to his right, it's Peter Cresse. Peter C. and Peter O. And with that, I'm going to get into the first slide. Randall, could you advance it to the, or should I do that? I have that here. Okay. Oh, I'll just go. Okay. Again, battle for the next billion consumers on the media front. What I like to do when I'm getting into a session that's a little bit undefined and not really sure where we're going to go on it, I like to really reduce it to some basics just to get us into the general scenario and get some thoughts at this. Now, what I'd like to point out is none of these where, why, when, whats are all inclusive. They're just a couple of ideas. And wouldn't you know it, Mr. Bixler arrives in the nick of time. And I'm going to ask Randall to come up and help me, because at the very end of this, we're going to add Bix's slide, which is right here. Thank you for joining us. Jeff Bixler is an assistant vice president for Hughes in Germantown, Maryland. And he's going to go through and introduce himself as soon as I've done these. Okay, the first where. Oh, it's all right. The first is where. Where are we going to find the next billion media consumers? And again, I want to remind you, this is not all inclusive. These are just some thoughts. So right now, we're in the year 2009. We're almost halfway into that. How quickly is one of the answers that I'm going to try and provide here, but also some of the other visions of this. Obviously, when you're getting to 1 billion consumers and you've got 1.3 billion people in China and you've got 1.1 to 1.2 billion people in India, together you've got 2.5 billion people right there. So development of that next billion consumers, I would say tier one, the first choice is going to be China and India. Another thought here, Russia and Brazil. In other words, companies or countries that are very well developed, relatively speaking, have a lot of people and have a lot of opportunity to get into these new media. Okay, next session would be who? Well, part of what drives the next entree to the next billion media consumers are going to be given companies that we know have done extremely well and continue to do well, companies like Google and MySpace. They're at that top tier. The next tier of companies that are going to develop this billion consumers are companies like Twitter, getting a lot of publicity right now, Verizon, and I point out the US DBS duo, which is EchoStar and DirecTV, in large measure because this is a satellite-based content theater, but also because if you look back over their development in the last 15 years, they have been very, very innovative. And they have been ahead of their competitors when it comes to innovation. And I like Verizon as a company in the telco space that has deep pockets, but at the same time I think is very well run. Okay, what? Well, some of the issues and trends and patterns at the top level are obviously the internet and broadband carriage of signals to mobile devices. There isn't a person here in this whole session, I'm sure today, or in this whole hall that doesn't have one of these on his or her hip. This is continuing to be the future. And this is in its adolescent stage. So as this gets better and better at being a computer that can deliver all those things whenever you want, and we'll talk a little bit about what some of those things are, as that improves and gets into its adulthood, this is going to change tremendously. Another issue or trend in the second tier is, of course, IPTV. In other words, as we open up the internet and we open up the broadband, not just to mobile devices, but to our home computers and our home laptops, what happens in that video? Browser hubs become more and more important. In other words, a Google or a MySpace becomes more and more of a center, an access point for huge numbers of additional things we haven't even seen yet. And then issues, trends, and patterns, tier 3, personalized content. That's a session I'm going to be moderating tomorrow at 4 o'clock. It's a super session right up here between Central and South Halls. The reason I picked that personalized content as the topic is because if anybody here, including our panelists, can find a trend that's more important to today's entertainment, media, and communications than personalized content, please raise your hand and let me know about it, because I haven't seen it. And then ease of use and less formality, and I saw that, Peter, so you're going to get your chance to speak up. Ease of use and less formality, I think, are going to come into the media space, and right now companies like MySpace are doing a great job to add that so that people are more likely to want to get it, and we get to that next billion media consumers. Okay, and then the why. Well, the why is really a question of what are some of the key things that are going to be developed in this next billion consumers and the drive to get them. And one of the things I talked to my son about last night, who's a senior at the University of Denver, and that is the idea that instead of IMing just around the corner, one of the things that's going to drive that next billion consumers is instant video. So you hold this in front of you, you say, hey, what's going on? And the person gets that video or has access to that video, and then they answer you back. Instead of doing it with text, you do it with a video camera that's on this phone, and you answer back and forth and you build your dialogue. Some more changes. I've got to figure out how to make this a little bit more profitable. Got to figure out how to get advertisers into it, get advertising agencies into it, get people into it so that they can make money, get satellite companies into it so that they can make money. It becomes more and more location-based. In other words, this, wherever I am, reads where I am and gives me local information that is either going to be local for where I am now or local for where I come from. Those two localities are going to be very important. And so more and more of the skew of the content that comes on here isn't going to just be random stuff. It's going to be random stuff that is local and therefore more relevant towards me. And interest-based, same thing. Personalized content. If you give people what they want to see, they will watch. And that's true of content in the form of shows. That's true in the form of content in the form of advertising. And let's face it, we still haven't found a model that works better than advertising other than subscription-based, and the two of them will continue to battle. And then less formality. Another thing I got from my conversation with my kids is the idea that some of the reason why a MySpace works so well is because it's much less formal than your standard email. And because it's less formal, it's easier to do. It's easier to connect with somebody. It's easier to introduce yourself to somebody. It's easier to get them into your world. So that's what's going to drive the next billion media consumers. And then the when? Well, I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm willing to estimate that within the next 3 years, we add that next billion media consumers. And with that, we're going to go again to Peter C., Peter O., and Jeff Bixler of Hughes, starting with Peter C.
As a quick introduction, I wanted to keep it light. So hi, everybody. And I want to tell you about the extensibility. So it's blatantly self-promoting, but fun too. So I'm from Entropy. There you're in the top left-hand corner. But I'm not just from Entropy. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm a sales and marketing person there. And, well, I happen to have Cresse Media because I have that as a hobby and an interest too. So I have my own website, Cresse.com. And, well, I have my own blog. It's Cresse Media. I'm just, love to blog about what I do every day. I don't Twitter, but I blog. And I'm an author. I just had a book came out. It's a crazy book called The Bloody Hand. And, well, if I wrote a book, I have another book coming out, a book of poetry, actually. It's Listen, Love, Listen. This is all true. And actually, I'm on Facebook, which is how I manage my social network. And I have a daughter. I'm Lauren's dad there on Facebook. And, well, I also have another daughter. I'm Monica's dad on Facebook, so I'm extensible there. And it's a sad thing to say, but I'm an ex-husband on Facebook. My ex-wife has me on her Facebook. I don't know how that happened, but it's terrible. And then I'm a single male. I'm on Match.com. So if you'd like to find me, you're going to find me on the web. No problem. So that's my introduction, which will lead later into some of the concepts I have. So that's a lot of fun. My concept that I'd like to talk through is just a view of the world, and I've chosen to go thematic and talk about leading indicators of what that really means. And I think what we're doing is let's think about billions of things. It's like Carl Sagan in the old billions and billions of stars. The billion things that are happening are clicks. Think of a click. Think how easy to do. You're clicking and you're interacting with your media in so many significant ways. You're texting and clicking. So the activity from your brain in your action is a click. We're not talking enough about clicks and behaviors about clicks. From a click comes an experience. It's something you're either sending out and sharing or something you're experiencing, but it's back and forth, click. And it's very much like Pavlov's dog. You're getting a reward system based upon your clicks. And of that clicks, what we're able to do is make ourselves extensible and be able to share. My concept, and on my blogs and websites, I talk about sharing and creating in this connected world. This is nothing new, but this is how I see the world. So where I see things happening are the next billion customers. They are absolutely defined by a combination of click, experience, and share. And what that means is that because our brain is billions and billions of cells, and because we have our own behavior, we're defined actually by the metadata in our world. And so not to get too deep, but we look at content as a driver for the next billion customers, people consuming content. I don't think so. I think we already know what content is. I know that the Boston Bruins are going to play the Montreal Canadiens in Game 3 coming up. I already know that. I already know what that game's going to be like. I don't know the outcome, but I know what the game is. I know the content. But what I don't know is the context. And what metadata provide are context. And I think what's driving the next billion customers is not content, but it's context. And I think we have to change our view to say, can we get any more compelling content? How much more compelling can we be? On a newsworthy basis, how much more can we be? If you just turn on the Weather Channel, that's newsworthy enough. So the point is, under this sort of paradigm of click, experience and then share, I see it all in the context. And so I have more points to make, and I don't want to monopolize because I like to share among my colleagues, but I think as you move down metadata is exciting, and I'm absolutely a media business person. Metadata relates more to monetization of media today than content does. Content to me is becoming boring. I'm seeing the same images. They're not really changing. But context of that media and the ability to share and get other things is really exciting to me. So I think that's my big point that I'll delve deeper into.
Thank you, Peter C. And now Peter O. from Intelsat.
First of all, a quick correction. Actually, my responsibility at Intelsat is sales rather than marketing. I'm responsible for selling the video transport services to all the major media companies in the U.S. And really, my introduction and why Intelsat is here on the panel. The reason is that the businesses of our core customers, the media companies, is really changing. I think that in the past, the TV and entertainment business was really driven by the head of studios and by the programmers that dictated at what time and what are we going to watch, with the very rigid linear TV and watching the TV on schedule. The studio heads used to have a very strict windowing for the releases of the media, and we were dictated, when we can watch the movie in the theater, when would it come out on the VOD, when would it show up on the shelves in the store as a DVD. And that's really changing. And for the first time in our business, it's actually a consumer that is driving the next generation of the entertainment consumers. So several things that happened. This is not just an overnight phenomena. First of all, especially in this market, and my contention would be that it's not, we don't necessarily have to look for the next billion consumer media business outside of the U.S., but here in the U.S., we really became a broadband nation. The growth rate of the broadband connections and the speeds which they offer is staggering, and that's really changing how the content can be delivered to the consumers today. The social networking has been a phenomenon on the net, and I think going forward there are technologies that will allow people to consume entertainment-based video in connection with the social interaction. So there are already several technology companies that are showing the technology where you are actually able to watch your favorite show or the game together with your friends that might be in a different city, in a different state. An ability to actually share that experience, the entertainment viewing TV experience with your friends that are remote, I think is going to be a significant change in the business. Obviously, the technology and the devices that are available today in the market are changing fundamentally how the entertainment is being consumed. It's a cliche by now, what they want, when they want, wherever they want, and on any device you want. But that's really true, especially when you look at the younger generation that is very technology savvy and driven by the gadgets. It's absolutely changing environment of TV consumption. And lastly, for I think consumers that are still tied into their TV in the living room, another significant technology that is making a difference is home networking and ability to move the content in your house among different devices. Actually, ability to take that content that you purchased through the subscription outside of your house. So being able to download that into the storage that you might have on your TV player in your car, download it on your portable media player or on your phone and take it with you on the road, whether you're just going to the grocery store or will be going to the driver's license office where you got to sit for 2 hours to get your driver's license, or whether you go on the business trip. So those are kind of 4 areas that have changed significantly over the past 2 or 3 years. That I think are creating tremendous opportunities for the media companies here in the U.S. And the good thing is that there is more time being spent consuming media, including the traditional TV. The recent data showed that over the last couple of years, the average time of TV viewing in a household increased, I think, by about 2 hours. So that's encouraging, specifically if you add cumulative time that people spend consuming media on the PC or the portable devices. So the biggest obstacle, I think, is coming up with the new business models. And I think the media industry will learn from, or the TV industry, video industry will learn from what happened to music and the newspapers. That are going through a tremendous change, and part of it is because for a long time there was a denial of the abilities of the new technology, and it's not that the people consume less news today, and that's why newspapers are struggling. They're consuming more, but they're consuming in a different way. So the challenge for us here in the U.S. is find the sustainable business models that will drive this future change. Thank you.
Okay, we are now going to go to Jeff Bixler, who is the Assistant Vice President for Hughes out of Germantown. And I'm going to ask Jeff, well, the slide's coming up, just to introduce himself briefly, give a little bit of a statement as to his bio and his background at Hughes, and then tell us a little bit about Hughes.
Hi, I'm Jeff Bixler. I'm surprised Jimmy didn't call me Jeff B. You would be like my cohorts here. I head up business development for digital media solutions at Hughes, and also provide marketing support for our large enterprise, our small medium enterprise, and our government groups. My background has been in cable television, satellite communications, like my 2 colleagues to my left. I had a good period of my career at Scientific Atlanta, so we all have that in common. Unlike Peter next to me, I'm quite sure that my ex-wife does not have a photo of me on her Facebook site. And if my current wife saw me on Match.com, I'd be in trouble as well. But I want to go to the slide. Jimmy said I could only have 1 slide, so he wanted to know how the consumer behavior was driving what we do at Hughes. And Hughes, as a managed service provider, in the end of 2008, we passed the $1 billion mark in revenue. And approximately 35% of that revenue is made up by our consumer group, where we provide broadband services over satellite to consumers. So if you look to the left of the slide, some of the types of services and content that we've been talking about here, if you look at Skype, everybody knows the success of iTunes. If you look at YouTube and the 325 million downloads every day, those type of applications, along with all the peer-to-peer, BitTorrent and others, we estimate close to 50% of the traffic on the internet for our customers related to peer-to-peer. So when you see these type of content and resulting behavior, it really drives the need for increased bandwidth. And so a couple years ago, we embarked upon designing, building, and launching a new satellite. It's called Spaceway 3. Went into service in the spring of last year. And it provides much higher data rates, up to 5 megabits on some of our premium plans. And so as a company, even though there's lots of great things, technology and so forth, we really need to focus on the service needs because the consumers are just continuing to drive the demand for content that takes a lot of bandwidth. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jimmy, and we'll have some good questions.
Great. My first question, I'm going to look at the business models and the money that should be behind these new processes and new pieces of hardware that are going to develop the next billion consumers. And my question is a question for Peter C., and that is, does new digital media video create incremental revenue opportunities, or is it cannibalizing existing business models? I'm going to say it one more time. Does new digital media video create incremental revenue opportunities, or is it cannibalizing existing business models? But I want to start by asking Peter O. something about what he showed on his slide. He said that the consumer is driving the experience. Well, if you're like me as a consumer, you don't want to pay anything. You want everything to be free. How do we juxtapose those? Gentlemen, let's start with Peter O.
Well, I think that there's a little bit of a cultural issue or a social issue where indeed, when the internet was launched, everything on the net was free and it was really provided as a public service. And I think a lot of consumers still view it that way even today. Obviously the production of a high quality content is not free. It's actually very costly. So the content company have to recoup the investments that they make in production. I think that as the time goes on, and I wish I had a crystal ball and make a prediction which way it's going to go. I think that in the future there is going to be a business model which is going to be a mix between a subscription and the advertising that will allow the media companies to collect the revenues necessary to produce the content. I'm also, what I'm seeing is that one of the scenarios, Jimmy, that you outlined about IPTV, killing the regular TV, and I don't think that time is coming anytime soon. I think that there's going to be an incremental revenue for a lot of companies to produce and transmit new content over the internet. As well, it creates really a tremendous opportunity to take an old content that's been sitting on the shelves and is not scheduled into the linear channels and monetize that content. If you look at the companies, for example, like Discovery, or some of the big networks like NBC, CBS that have years and years of different shows, some of them in a high, still in a very high demand. Is there a way to monetize using the broadband pipes and on-demand viewing of those shows? And I would venture to say that absolutely yes.
Okay, Peter C. Again, the question: new media, incremental revenue opportunities, or cannibalizing existing business models? And Jeff, we'll come to you on this same question.
Incremental revenue, sure. If you look at online revenues versus linear revenues, They're a fraction of what linear revenues are. Make no mistake about it, TV watching today is massive compared to online, which is not. Now, that's in terms of the dollar figures, the programming, everything else. In terms of growth rates in the future, we have to redefine that. So I think it's incremental. I think media companies today look at it that way. You can look at the investment they make and the teams of people who work on it. They can't come off game. They have to provide compelling programs for television. And I believe that experience will be there for a really, really long time. So even though there's a hype, even at the show, for themes and stuff like this, we still have to be in the business of linear video. And that's good programming. Just watch a sports event on TV. You can watch NBA Finals on your computer or PGA Golf, but I'm going to watch it on my 1080i Sony 70-inch TV and sit there all day and watch it. And I'm going to love it. And I'm even going to watch the commercials because they're even entertaining. So it's incremental to me. And as far as new opportunities on a business model, that's obviously, I think, what we're talking about of what's coming.
Jeff, Hughes knows a little bit about making money, as you indicated. Give us a little bit of thought on this one.
Well, I would have to just answer it as yes, a little bit of both. I think that some of these innovative types of content that we're seeing, certainly with any user-generated content, as Jimmy talked about earlier, is bringing out new things that are a variety, things that people didn't even know that was content they would be interested in. So there is going to be incremental revenue because of that. I mean, you're going to get to a point where some people just run out of time in the day to view all the different types of media. But then on the cannibalization side, I see it more as being an issue with the advertising dollars. There's only going to be so many ad dollars to go around, and as you have some of these new services, if they are possibly hybrids, as Peter O. mentioned, or if they're a successful model such as Hulu, you look at the success of Hulu, and NBC and Fox has done a great job of repurposing the content. And you look at the number of downloads, they're doing quite well. I think they're already number 2 after YouTube in a very short period of time. So again, that's a significant amount of ad dollars that's going to take away from other media.
I'm going to come back to Jeff for a little bit more fleshing out of a particular new media that I think all of you need to hear a little bit more about, and that's this one. Part of Jeff's biography, if you were to footnote it, would be that he was my mentor when I wrote this book, and he's a large part of the reason why I wrote this book in the first place. Hughes has for a long, long time been all over digital signage. Jeff, can you tell us from a Hughes point of view what it is about digital signage that connects with this title, The Battle for the Next Billion Media Consumers?
Well, I think the reality is that, digital media, digital signage, the objective is to reach the consumer closer to the point of purchase. And if you look at all the ad dollars spent, for instance, you look at the automotive market, which obviously has been suffering in the recent economy, and in past years, the automotive groups were the largest ad spenders. We're working with a company now called Automotive Broadcast Network. And automotive broadcasting, what they do is they put up a channel in the service waiting area at the dealerships. So it sounds simple enough. Most of them already had televisions, but the average person there spends an hour and 32 minutes waiting for their car to be serviced. So they'd sit there while their Chevy Suburban was being worked on. Their kids might be subjected to Jerry Springer or whatever show is on at the daytime hour, and they'll sit there and they'll watch a Ford Explorer ad come across network television. So the business model here is to basically inject ads that are directly relevant to that dealer and to that manufacturer's brand. They've spent so much money trying to get the person into their dealership. Here they have the customer sitting there. They have an opportunity to upsell them on services. They might be getting their transmission service and don't realize that, hey, for a little more money, they could have their brakes done or whatever. So it's a very interesting and successful model. And so when we talk about bringing media to the masses and the next billion and so forth, it isn't just necessarily at home. Digital media and digital signage goes out and reaches them in the out-of-home markets.
Peter O., some thoughts on digital signage and how that relates to Intelsat?
Well, we are very active, actually, in the digital signage market and delivery of the signage content, through our partners. And obviously, we look at any opportunity to transmit and transport the video over our networks. I think one of the things with the digital signage has been a little bit of the obstacle is the an argument in the industry whether that's really a satellite versus the fiber application. We as a company try to really hedge the bets, and little known fact is that we actually operate a very extensive fiber network, about 28,000 miles of fiber in the ground. So going forward, we're looking at opportunities both on the fiber and over the satellite with the digital signage as well as everything else. Now, one note that I would also like to add is to what Jeff said is that a very important point is that digital media. It's not only about the entertainment, but I think it's going to also change the way we do business and we work. Technologies such as telepresence and the personal video communication, not only for the entertainment purposes, but in business, is right around the corner. And there are already companies offering services where you can actually have a virtual meeting in the HD quality. I think in the future, we will expect either in our professional or private life a very similar video experiences. Those both worlds today are coming closer and closer. We're still not quite there, but in the future, I believe there is going to be really a transparent environment where you're going to be able, with different devices, to mix your business and professional and the entertainment experiences together.
Peter C., I'm going to shift gears here unless you have a burning point you want to make about this one. I'm going to ask a little bit about the next generation. Young people, let's define them as a demographic of under 21s. What do you think that they do to this question of the next billion media consumers? What are some of the important things we have to remember and point out when it comes to talking about young people?
It's embodied, young people, embodied to me in the one word, and that word is share. Share as a definition of self. And I'm only as good a person as the number of friends I can have on Facebook. I have 100 Facebook friends. My daughter has 1,000 Facebook friends. An order of magnitude difference. That's an actual fact in terms of friends. I don't want more than 100 friends on Facebook. I find myself reading erroneous data, Twitter, of the people on Facebook from a person I met in Brazil who said, friend me. And I'm reading about things I don't want to know about. But for her, it's the process of sharing. And that sharing is capturing information about her. And as it relates to young people, the real question is for media is, how do you move into the monetization of her behavior? And I think the monetization of her behavior is absolutely in the metadata. The next billion consumers to me is sitting right here. I am a billion customer. I have a billion interaction and transactions that I do a day around me with my network. And so what we're looking for is a demographic, and one of the charts that you showed is one that is not on my mind, Jimmy, and that is that, where are they? They're sitting right here. They're not in Russia, they're not in China, it's not a numbers game that way. I think it's all within the transaction. And if you look at that, my basic point is that we shouldn't be thinking about content, because that's going to change. What you'll be thinking about is context and capturing, and there's a lifetime. There's a great site out there that I use all the time in sales, and it's People, P-I-P-L. Does anybody use People? It's awesome. It's a little site that basically goes everywhere in the web and says, where did we find you? Kind of the intro chart. And it's such a tell. And you can basically see where people have been, what's on the web, anything that's been shared on the web. So the long and short of it is the rhetorical question to my colleagues would be, if young people are sharing and that's their experience, that seems antithetical to broadcast, to consuming, and I don't know how to reconcile that.
Peter O., any follow-up thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I believe that the driving force of the change in the future is the young demographic that is growing up in a really different environment and just consuming media on the go on different devices. I'm a little bit skeptical, when people say, well, all the media in the future is going to be consumed on the PC or on a small screen. I think that I could kind of progress, through the different demographics. TV will stay a really essential screen for the video entertainment, which is a good news for everybody in this business. I think what's going to be changing is the way that content is delivered to your TV. I think in the future it's not necessarily going to be over the traditional RF or the terrestrial TV, but it's going to be delivered over the IP networks, and it's going to have to be an integrated experience. So your voice communication, your video entertainment needs, heck, even home automation type of services will be integrated both into the TV and into the mobile devices, and it's driven by the young generation and their fluency in operating those devices.
But Peter, just a quick question. But the numbers are falling for young people. Young people aren't watching TV. Aren't your media customers really nervous that they're not really connecting with the young people, either through programming or what I talked about, their new behaviors? It looks kind of bleak. Do you just have to wait for them to grow up to become couch potatoes or trapped at home with their kids that they're eventually going to have? It looks bad on paper.
I think there are a couple of issues, right? I think that as I said, as you progress through the demographic, your habits will change a little bit. But I think the biggest change, and that's where the media companies should be concerned, is the ability to deliver the content over the different platforms. Today it's still very much about the linear TV. I think at best we can call experimentation with what's going on with Hulu. Even though it's a successful venture. YouTube just announced posting of the regular TV shows on their side as well. So I believe again it's more of a how do you deliver the content rather. Where do you deliver that content to?
Okay.
Jeff, do you have some thoughts on this one?
Well, I simply refer to the youth as being spontaneous. I call them the spontaneous generation. And if you look at the way they live their life, they're not worried or scared of technology. They just jump right in, and that's why it's such an exciting market and really poised for growth. Companies go through years and years of marketing and searching for what has always been called an early adopter. Every one of these young people are early adopters, and they just jump right into the applications, focus on the content. You think of way back when people, I'll say our parents used to write letters back and forth as a way to communicate. And Peter talked about the sharing aspect. I mean, you think about how long people would take to think what they're going to put in that letter. I mean, look at the way kids, you guys have them. They text back and forth, and it's just instantaneous. And it's just going to be a whole different way that they will communicate. And as they start populating the workforce and heaven forbid what their kids are going to be like, it's going to be a fun ride.
I'm going to make a statement here. I'm going to offer the three gentlemen an opportunity to comment. But if not, we'll go into my next question about international growth markets. The Carmel Group did a study within the last year or so about the importance to people of privacy. How important is privacy when you're opting in for ads, when you're opting in for any kind of content? And we were quite surprised. The younger demographic, people who were in their teens, people even in their 20s, were relatively and surprisingly less concerned about privacy than people, I would say, of my generation. And we were quite surprised at this. Privacy is becoming less and less of an issue with MySpace and Facebook and the instantaneousness of this. And what's really important to realize about this is because if you have less a concern about privacy, then you're more willing to allow relevant content to be brought to you by others. You're going to open yourself up for that. and that's a great opportunity for advertisers. Gentlemen, any thoughts on that? Okay, Peter?
Yeah, I have a provocative opinion, so I'll just mix it up since we're on the floor today. So I think the social consciousness, especially in America, has absolutely penetrated our privacy. I think people have a belief in the United States especially that our government has already sold out. The recent actions of our government as related to how they worked with our telecommunications companies and the data they collected. So if you talk to young people today, they've already sold out. So it's moot. It's a moot point about privacy. They've already got you. Just go online, and as a former officer in the military, I well know that the collection means technically to be able to get the data is there, will always be there, and you could argue the politics of whether it's important or not, and especially in our social consciousness time. So privacy, no, it's over. I think it's over. I think share it.
I would tend to agree with that as well. And I think, you know, when Peter mentioned his daughter having, 1,000 friends on the Facebook, I mean, forget any other kind of privacy. I mean, sharing your own personal data with over 1,000 people shows you that, culturally it's very acceptable right now for young people to share everything with just about anybody.
Okay, I had put up a slide here that suggested that the next billion media consumers are going to come from China and India, first here, and then other countries I mentioned were Brazil and Russia. Gentlemen, any thoughts on other potential international hotbeds of the new media and getting to the next billion media consumers? Jeff? You spend a lot of time in an international arena. Your company is pretty well known around the world. What looks good?
Well, we've been doing a lot of work in Asia and Latin America, and a lot of the focus has been on the educational aspects. Again, everybody has a different definition of media, but we truly expand that to include global education and distance learning opportunities. For instance, in India, Hughes is known more as a university than they are as a technology and service provider. And we actually use satellite delivery to provide courses for college students and for workers. And we're able to reach a lot of locations that never would happen without that. And you look at some of the things that we're doing in Latin America. In Brazil, for instance, we provide schooling in the Amazon region that would not be available if it wasn't for satellite delivery and internet. So again, that's what I see a lot of the growth being on the media, the international, because there's a lot more focus and a lot more need for the education.
Peter C.
I think, and I'll relate this to the geography, I think the most exciting aspect on content and growth for the billion companies is in music. I think music ties itself best to social networking. It's easy, it's something you can have a commentary, it's a small download, it's not a lot of bits of data. And where I see music really playing itself out dramatically is in Latin America. On a cultural basis. I mean, people are really known by their playlists, and when we see the growth of iTunes and other areas, I think any place where music is really free and open will show the greatest area of growth for media. So music in Latin America is kind of cool for me.
Peter O., Intelsat knows something about the world.
Yes, we do. We provide services around the world, and even though my specialty is here in the U.S., as a part of what I do take major media companies around the world and help them distribute their signals around the world. I think that some of the markets and countries that you mentioned indeed are poised for the incredible growth, but it's really, I think, more in a traditional pay TV market. I've just recently read an article that China is probably going to be one of the biggest IPTV markets over the next couple of years. And I think a lot of the content that we're talking here about and a free distribution of various content across the platforms, it happens so that a lot of those markets and the countries that you mentioned have pretty conservative governments that like to control what their citizens do. So, in addition to a technical infrastructure barrier that you're going to have in those countries, you're also going to have a regulatory barrier to that will prevent you from some of the new platform distribution that you can see in Western Europe or in the U.S.
About 4 years ago, through my youngest son, we had an opportunity to be introduced to some music from, I think, Bulgaria or Romania. And it was this great song called Maya He. Has anybody ever heard this song? No? Well, it's an exact example of what you're talking about. There isn't a single word in that song that I understand, but that song for weeks was on my favorite playlist through the internet. And again, that example that Peter C. gave of music opening up this avenue. I looked out into the session. I know a few of the people out here, and they're pretty smart people. This is your chance for you in the audience to connect with some pretty smart people up here on the stage. Some of you came a long way and spent a lot of money. This is your chance to get a little bit more out of NAB. Do we have any questions from the audience? And if we do, we'll start with this gentleman right here. Randall will give him the microphone. Please identify yourself and your affiliation.
Yes, I'm Seish Sema with SES, and I want to throw a real challenge here. YouTube,
Talk really loud.
YouTube is supposed to predict that YouTube will lose about $500 million this year. So why bother adding another billion people if they're going to lose more money?
The question again is, why would YouTube add more people to its service if it's going to lose money anyway? The gentleman from SES. Anybody want to dig into that? Peter C.
So the business model of YouTube is to collect the data on you by your behavior. So the video of YouTube that we could watch here is a loss leader. So the question is, at what point are you able to capture the demographics? So that's, I think, what's happening. And it has to be combined with search and to be able to get into a new metadata monetization model. So what has to happen with YouTube is that they have to go together with a company that's in the business of data. And I think that's the whole thing. We keep talking about video and experience, but it's the combination of video together with data. And so the question is, at what break point can they do it? Now, I think it'll just, transition and morph into there's a pay part too and everything else, but that's my view.
Okay, we're going to go to another audience question. We'll go right next to you, Randall. Please identify yourself and your affiliation.
Hi, Anton Gelman, Free World Pulse.
Can you talk louder?
Yes, I can. So basically, we're talking about the next billion users, and generally those billion users are coming from emerging markets, markets that have different cultures previously untapped. They use the internet and they use media in different ways than we do. And so the question is, how do you think that will affect both the media industry as a whole, and particularly how will that come back and affect our Western media companies?
So the question is, the new media or the new users and their different ways of using, how will it affect existing media?
Exactly.
Well,
right.
I have a small one that I'm very excited about that's maybe a niche market. It's in the faith-based area for Muslim-based programming. If you think about turning on the TV at late at night or early on a Sunday morning, there are countless programs on cable that are Christian-based, faith-based that you can watch. Joel Osteen at 10 o'clock on a Sunday that I watch, and many others that have talent. I think we're really just beginning to see the incipient talent of Muslim faith-based in that particular area from an emerging market. And it's going to be exciting because I think people are going to consume that differently as it relates to a qualified reading of the Quran as opposed to a sharing experience on a broadcast basis. It's going to be different and exciting for the Middle Eastern market and the Arab-based cultures. I think that's one cool area.
Another quick comment. I think internationally, the big difference is as well is that the internet infrastructure originally was really built without accounting for video traffic on it, right? So that really allows the media companies with a very unique content to get to the niche areas. And quite honestly, a lot of those markets and emerging markets, growing the either digital terrestrial TV infrastructure or a pay TV, RF-based infrastructure is just no starter. And really, the internet and IP is really the only way to reach those consumers, specifically because it's also a very narrow part of those societies in those countries that actually can afford some of those services. And it just opens up a whole group of the consumers for the media companies. Again, the question goes back to how do you monetize that?
What country?
Jeff?
What country do you think it's just a quick? What country?
Well, I mean, we're talking about countries like Russia, you know, in India.
Yeah, emerging.
Jeff, the question I was going to ask, but I'm going to let you make your comment first. Please, make your comment that you were going to make.
Well, the only comment I would make is that I think that we're going to find diverse advertising models in some of these other regions and countries. And as the gentleman from SES, brought up on, whether the YouTube business model will work, and as Peter responded, there's lots of different ways to look at these things and how they're going to occur in the future. Something as simple as like on Hulu, they started asking the users of that, would you rather, instead of having 4 30-second advertisements during the program, would you rather have 1 2-minute ad? And it's something like 85 to 90% of the respondents want the 2-minute ad. So, that's something that is so different than what our media companies and our advertisers have looked at in the past. And so what I'm hoping is that in North America, we start looking at some of the success in these other regions internationally and culturally and see what might work in the future here in the U.S.
Jeff, the question I was going to ask relating to Peter O's comment about the internet initially being not built to have big bandwidth into the home and video not really being a part of that. You built an amazing satellite, a spaceway satellite, that's all about getting access, getting bandwidth out there. How do you respond to the future and how much bandwidth we have to develop? Will we develop it?
Yeah, I think, again, what's happening with the terrestrial networks, companies such as Verizon and AT&T are doing a great job building out, their FiOS-type services. For us, if you look at the market that we're chasing over satellite, is we don't necessarily try to compete where there's availability of cable modems or good DSL service, and so we focus more in the rural areas. So we think there's going to be 15 to 20 million people in North America that will never be fully served by broadband. So that's why, as Jimmy mentioned, we built the specially designed Spaceway 3 satellite, and it has roughly the capacity of 7 or 8 normal satellites. And again, the purpose was to have adjustable bandwidth and power so that we could provide better service, and as I said before, speeds up to 5 megabits. As people start downloading more and more of the television content, it's going to be more and more critical. We just don't see an end in sight.
Peter O., Intelsat, will it be providing enough bandwidth in the future?
Absolutely. We currently operate over the 50 satellites around the world. As I mentioned, we have complementary fiber network as well. And I think the good news for anybody that's in this business, whether it's content creation or content transmission business, is that there is more content being created than ever. There's more content being consumed than ever, and that means more bandwidth that needs to be used. It just happens so that connectivity is really different. It's not anymore from the studio to the cable operator and DTH provider, but you have a variety of the secondary video distributors to which you have to deliver the content in different formats. So we are very bullish about the future. We have active plans to launch more satellites, actually most of them outside of the U.S., because we really see that there is going to be a tremendous growth of the demand for the bandwidth.
Peter C.?
For Peter O., so do you think if you want to launch a TV channel, you have to cut a deal with the guys who own a lot of the carriage? I'm thinking in the sports market where MLB Networks, one of your customers, has to cut a deal to get on. Or NFL Networks now is shut out of Comcast. So you can't get carriage unless you cut a deal with the carriage providers. That's different. In the old days, you can't even get a per subscriber fee anymore. It's really changing. How, if I had a great television program, I can be blocked out. Do you think that there's a fairness to that, or is what's happening in the market? Well, it doesn't seem right to me that NFL Networks, one of the greatest sports, can't be on TV and I can't get it.
Well, I think part of the problem is that the older infrastructure really puts some limits on the operators, right? So Comcast is operating a 1 gig network, and that's all it is. And it's a broadcast network. There are technologies that they're employing to deal with that and kind of mimic what IPTV does today. I think where we are fortunate is that we have now companies like AT&T with the Uverse and Verizon with Fios, where really bandwidth is not an issue, and a lot of I'm not even talking about the NFL, but a lot of niche HD channels, channels like World Fishing Channel are getting encouraged and putting a competitive pressure on cable and DTH to carry them as well. So I think that paradigm is really changing, and it's that because of the emergence of the IPTV.
We are the last session of the day, and we should have ended about 3 minutes ago, but I'm going to ask for one more question from the audience, and then I'm going to throw out one more opinion question among the three gentlemen. So this gentleman, would you please let us know who you are and what your affiliation is, and talk loudly into the microphone.
Yes, my name is Derek Annunciation with Kingdom Media, and my question is in regards to what you brought up about independent content creators. What do you think the future for independent content creators are going to be in order to be able to monetize their content?
Oh, I love that question. It's the cost of acquisition. The cost to produce a video or a HD camera is $1,000. The red camera now, you can get the Scarlett for a kick-ass HD picture acquired with as much storage as you want. So the cost of acquisition, you can film your own movie for $15,000. So for content creators. Secondly, if you go over to the post-production area, in post right now, unbelievably cheap. You can create that, go from the red, the final cut, and then you can author a DVD for $3,000, which used to cost. So the cost of production has dramatically dropped. And then secondly, as we see the rise of downloads and acquisition, you can dump it on the net because of compression. So I am really buoyant about that, and we're going to see a rise. And it's a leading indicator, all these things, because now we're going to see a rise of indie-type movies and fresh content that's really going to come. I'm really buoyant about that, and I'm seeing that. That's what I'm working in right now, is a lot of indie production of some compelling content. So great.
Wait. Please wait. This is being streamed, so we want people to be able to hear it. Say that again.
What do you see as the future of the monetization of that content? Once compelling content is created, great content is created. Still today, I travel all over the country, Sundance and NAB and different things. The question is still today, how are we making any money? Well, yes, we have to make it for a lower cost, but still, how do we profit from the things that we create? Well,
Jimmy said it was a smart panel. The answer is I don't know. I really don't know. I can't break out in my mind of the existing models where you're doing download models or banner advertising. So the answer is I don't know. I know how it's breaking out today. It's breaking backwards into, you build grassroots and it builds backwards into support to be able to do a linear programming. So it's sort of like a Negroponte shift, if you will, of media where you're moving from, you're getting a grassroots and then you get enough to do there from there. The answer is I don't. Maybe you guys have a feeling about that.
I would think that probably the download would be the revenue stream that's most acceptable, right? Because people already today are used to pay for download, and thank you Apple for actually introducing that concept of paying for content and then download again to the consumers. And I think it's
99 cents.
Yeah. I think the challenge for the independent producers is actually, it might be a great content, but how do you find that? And there are a variety of companies here at the convention that are offering innovative ways of the video search, and that was, I think, one aspect we didn't really touch on today. With all that great content and different platforms, how do you find it? Right? It's difficult enough to find it on your cable network when you have 400 channels. Now you're talking about millions of pieces of media on various platforms. How do you get there? And that's a big technological challenge for us as well as an industry.
And it's a software challenge through the interactive programming guide or the electronic programming guide. And Peter C., sometimes the best measure of a smart man is when they say they don't know. So thank you. My final question of the day is the topic again, the battle for the next billion media consumers. Starting with Peter O. from Intelsat. Will you give me an adjective a single adjective that you would use to define the battle for the next billion media consumers during the next 3 to 5 years, and why? Brief answer. Single adjective to define that battle in the next 3 to 5 years, and why?
Challenging, and the reason why is figuring out the business models. That's going to be the greatest challenge of this battle.
Great, thank you. Peter C., one word, brief answer.
I don't have an adjective, but it's metadata. Metadata is the way content will be monetized. And my prediction absolutely is that we're going to see major metadata data mining companies like IBM, Informatica, Clover, big companies and small get into the monetization of media through metadata, because that's where the bucks are, and that's where they're going to be able to depict video. That's...
Okay, Jeff Bixler from Hughes, please close us out.
The word that comes to mind is innovative, and that's both on the technology side and the content side. Just one last comment I'd make back to what Peter C. talked about on the metadata is I think that the searchability is something that's going to change what needs to happen with the content. You were asking, what does it take to be successful? I'm kind of like with Peter, if I knew I'd be in that part of the business. But when you talk about having content that is readily available because you can search it and find it. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal today in the technology section, the technology report, all about e-books. And so you look at what could happen with the whole market for electronic books delivered over the internet, and when you get into the metadata and the searchability, it could change the whole scheme. And they're talking about an individual being able to have their entire life's library, everything you've ever read, available to you online. They're talking about being able to download individual paragraphs or chapters, and so books might be sold almost serially, just like TV shows are. And then you might have an author specifically thinking every page he writes, where will that be on the Google ratings and pull up in the search format? So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, the battle for the next billion media consumers begins right now. Thank you very much, gentlemen.